We recently announced Tap to Pay for Android with Stripe, and in this video, I want to walk you through how to implement this feature in your Android application so you can get started accepting contactless in-person payments using your mobile phone or tablet. Tap to Pay works with contactless cards and digital mobile wallets such as Google Pay and Apple Pay. Here's what we'll be building. It's a sample demo application with a couple of screens to connect your phone as a mobile reader, indicate an amount for payment, and collect that payment using Tap to Pay. This tutorial uses Kotlin, but it can also be implemented using Java if it's the language that you're more familiar with. If that's the case, please refer to our docs. Before we start looking at some code, there's a few prerequisites. So first of all, you need to have a Stripe account. If you don't already have one, feel free to pause this video, sign up at stripe.com, and then come back when you're ready. This tutorial uses the Android SDK version 33 and Kotlin version 1.7.10. So if you're using an older version, it may still work with the code sample I'm going to show, but I can't guarantee that. So this post will only cover the code samples needed to get Tap to Pay working in your Android application. I will purposely not cover how to build and structure an Android app or go into details into the specific flow that I implemented. This is more relative to what you want to build. If you want to get started quickly, I recommend cloning the demo application on GitHub and follow the instructions in the README and follow along as I explain the different parts. So if you want to run it, you should see the demo that I showed you before. So a first screen that handles the connection to the phone as your reader, then a screen where you can edit some payment details, and finally, the Tap to Pay screen waiting for you to tap a credit card to process the payment. All right, so let's get started. The first section of the video is for people who have integrated with the Stripe Terminal SDK on Android before, as there are some configuration changes needed to be able to use Tap to Pay. So if you're watching this using the demo application, you can skip to the next section. If you're using an existing Android application that you want to update to use Tap to Pay, there's two changes necessary. So first, you need to update the Stripe Terminal SDK to the latest version and import the additional Stripe Terminal local mobile package in your build.gradle file. Now onto the code to implement the feature. One of the first things that you need to do is initialize a terminal instance by calling the initTerminal method from the terminal class. This will initialize a terminal for the given application context that you need to pass as the first parameter. Then you can pass the level of logging verbosity, an instance for the connect token provider interface to use when a new token is needed, and finally, a listener to inform of events in the terminal lifecycle. If you've used the Stripe Terminal Android SDK before, you should already have created the interface for the token provider and the listener. If not, feel free to check the token provider and terminal event listener files in the demo application. To use Stripe Terminal, you need to register one or more locations to manage readers and their activity by associating them with a physical location. You can do this via the Stripe dashboard or using the API, but let's go through how to do this in the dashboard. First, navigate to the terminal page, then scroll down to the location section. If you've already created locations, you can click on one of them to see its details. Otherwise, you can click on the new button to create a new location and fill in the details. In your Android app, you can write terminal.getInstance.listLocations to get your list of locations. Then you pass a limit for the number of the locations that you would like to fetch and a callback. The callback will save the location objects in a mutable list. For the purpose of this video, we're going to use the first location in the list as the one that we want to connect to. To find available readers registered to a location, you need to call the discoverReaders method. When implementing Tap to Pay, the configuration objects needs to have its discovery method argument set to local mobile. So it considers that the mobile phone running the application is a terminal device. You also need to pass a timeout value, a Boolean to simulate the terminal device or not, and more importantly, a location ID that will be the ID of the first location as mentioned just before. You need to pass this configuration object as the first parameter when calling discoverReaders, as well as a discovery listener instance that will provide the list of discovered readers. When readers are found, you can filter through them to only use the ones that are currently online. For the purpose of this tutorial, again, I'm going to use the first location returned, but you might want to make this code more dynamic in your own application to maybe display a list of readers and let your users select one. You can then use the reader variable to move on to the next step of connecting to the reader. To do this, you need to pass the location ID to the local mobile connection configuration method to create a config object that you will pass in the connect local mobile reader method. When the reader is successfully connected, you should be ready to accept payments the same way as you would when using other terminal devices. At this point, you need a backend server with endpoints to create a connection token and handle the different events that happen when capturing and processing payments with Stripe. So if you don't already have one, I recommend you clone our Stripe terminal backend example repo and follow the instructions in the README to set it up. The only thing you should need to change is to create a .env file to use your own Stripe API keys. Then you'll need to deploy this sample app on render, for example, copy the live URL and replace it in your Android app's config file. And once this is done, you can move on to implementing the logic related to actually capturing the payments. First, you need to create a payment intent. To do this, your Android application will need to make a POST request to your server implementing the Stripe API. In the demo application, the API client singleton object handles the calls to the backend and provides a create payment intent method you can call and pass payment details, including the amount, the currency, the authorization details, and a callback. When the payment intent is successfully created, you need to call the retrieve payment intent method with a secret present in the response body to retrieve the payment intent. A callback method is called when the payment intent is returned. And then the callback then calls a function to start collecting the payments. This function calls the collect payment method, passing the payment intent, a callback, and the skip tipping configuration as a Boolean. The callback then calls a function to process the payment when successful. To process the payment, you need to call the process payment method, passing the payment intent and a callback function that will capture the payment. At this point, if all the previous steps were successful, you should be able to run your application, connect your mobile phone as a reader, see the tap to pay screen after calling the collect payment method, and tap a credit card behind your device to process the payment. To double check that everything worked, you can check the dashboard under the payments section and see the payment being completed. And we're done. So to recap, there's 4 main steps to configure your Android phone to be used as a reader. Initialize a terminal instance as a first step, then list your locations, then discover your available readers, and then connect your selected reader and location. And then there's 4 other steps to set up the payment logic. So creating a payment intent, retrieving the payment intent, collecting the payment method, and processing and capturing the payment. Hopefully, following along with this tutorial, you were able to get a small tap-to-pay application working in a few minutes. Note that the integration shape for tap-to-pay and other dedicated terminal devices, such as the M2 and the WPE, is roughly the same. So tap-to-pay is modeled as another reader type. This makes it easy to start with tap-to-pay and then add dedicated terminal devices when you're ready. If you're interested in reading more, feel free to check out our docs or the Stripe Terminal Android SDK repository on GitHub. We hope that you'll have some fun implementing with tap-to-pay in your Android application. And until next time, thanks for watching.